Hello, I'm Regina Botros, and this is Backstage, where we talk with the who's who on stage, in dance, comedy and performing arts, speaking with the leading theatre makers of our times and how they came to the stage and what drives them and inspires them. I'm joined by Joseph Althouse. You might have seen him in The Visitors for Sydney Theatre Company. Well, he's back for Sydney Theatre Company in Whitefella Yella Tree. It was the winner of the Nick Enright Prize for Playwriting in 2023, and following a celebrated premiere season at Griffin Theatre Company, it's on at Sydney Theatre Company. Written by Dylan Van Den Berg, he's won so many other prizes, Griffin Award, Ronnie Seaboard Playwrights Award, among others. It's directed by Declan Green and Amy Soul, who directed the first production, which got amazing reviews, but is back with two new actors, including Joseph, as I said, from The Visitors. You might have seen him in that, as well as Bad Ancestors, Preppers and Black Comedy, among other things. Welcome to Stages, Joseph.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So tell us about the world of this play. What year is it, or what era is it?
It's set at first contact. So it's set, in that time. But it's a contemporary Australian play, so our costuming is modern. And Declan and Amy with Dylan, who wrote the play, really are playing with time and playing with the waves of contact and how that lives in our bodies.
Right. And so you say playing with time. How does time shift in the play?
Well, we start at like 15 years old. The first scene, we're quite young and given the responsibility to exchange messages. So we're from neighbouring tribes, exchanging information about the incoming community, the settlers, the colonizers.
Yeah.
And so, we start at 15 and then we end up at like 20 and 21.
Okay. So how can you reflect that on the stage? Is it in some kind of maturity or something, or written?
Yeah, well, the language gets more kind of sophisticated, which is helpful. But my character in particular, he starts off so emotionally intelligent and having to really hold that responsibility of story and dreaming, and that as an aspect and the key to connection to country. So he starts off quite emotionally intelligent, but his journey is he goes from storyteller to warrior almost as a result of his response to survival, which is a non-traditional character arc for someone who should be a storyteller.
Yeah, right. So tell me a little bit more about the character.
Yeah, so he's a storyteller for his tribe. He has a responsibility to hold the story and pass the knowledge down. And his elders give him that responsibility to be that custodian and caretaker of the story. But everyone around, his elders get sick very rapidly, and his tribe are not necessarily assimilating into the new system. They're kind of reserved and outside of the system, whereas Neddy's character does go into society. And that's the kind of conflict of the two characters, is that Neddy ends up going to the white people and to try and find his sister. Whereas my character has an obligation to stay outside of it and maintain the story of country.
So I couldn't help thinking, actually, before when you said, his way of survival is to become a warrior. I guess it's reflecting, you've just said it, so I guess it's obvious now, but like the time.
Yeah, dealing with change. And Ty says it in the play. He says, I'm cramming everything into my head, a ceremony, a story, and a song, and stuff that should take my whole life to learn. I've only had like days. And for me, that's the center of Ty's character, is that he's just having to so rapidly cram everything into his brain. And, as human beings, when we try to do that, we don't get to cross our T's and dot our I's. And that's how things can break down. So,
no time to process.
Yeah.
Mm.
So it's a rapid trajectory into that
Mm.
psychological arena, which is tricky as an actor to have to motivate, but Dylan really plots the journey, I think, for the audience so that you're there with us the whole time. And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful story to be able to share because it's something that our communities experience constantly.
How does I know that they're from different tribes. How does that influence the story, and not beyond, I guess, beyond the decisions to interact or not, or
Mm.
engage or not?
Well, I think Neddy's tribe, the settlers end up bringing like their sheep to Neddy's country, and so they start to Neddy's tribes hunt the sheep and eat the sheep, and whereas my tribe we don't engage with anything like we're not killing sheep. So then I think of like the consequences of that in a colonizer's mindset of like you've done this, ergo we can do this. Um, Whereas my tribe are like pacifist and are just trying to maintain law, LORE, law, whilst also finding a way to respond to neighboring tribes having to deal with the consequences of actions, even though they're justified in our system to eat is a right. And you think of like the fences going up and like zones being set up and how do you travel between areas, and the river plays such a huge role in the story and in my tribe's dreaming, that river mob. Um, and of course, we know that rivers were the first roads, they were the first highways of accessing places.
And it is a love story as well, and between, yeah, a queer love story. Do you want to talk about that in terms of, I guess, I don't know, the relationship to law or relationship to
Yeah.
land and people?
Yeah, it's a beautiful love story. It's two characters, that are dealing with a rapidly changing world, and they just create a little world for themselves where they can just express themselves freely and create. We end up creating a dreaming story for this lemon tree. So the yellow tree is a lemon tree, and that hangs on top of the set. And so we're throughout the whole story, we're kind of developing this creation story. And then at the end, Neddy, Danny Howard's character, um, tells the full story of the lemon tree that we've created together. So it's a little beautiful creation myth in and of itself, us two creating meaning for that, for our new life together. And then we end up cutting it down and carving out a little spot, and we float down the river.
It says in the original reviews like that it's you being the things that you learn rather than being taught, things that are learned. I wonder what that actually means. Like, is it that, I don't know, the relationship to land or place or those sort of stories? I don't know if you can, yeah, comment on that.
Yeah, I think learning in Aboriginal culture is very different to our Western concept of learning, yeah, there's traditional stories are so layered and deep, like there's meaning on meaning on meaning on meaning. And so I think that it's just a different way of thinking and a different way of connecting, and it serves a different function. Story serves a different function, I think. And I think that this play is really exploring that concept in a tradition, at Sydney Theatre Company on the wharf with Sydney Theatre audiences and Griffin audiences, and living in the middle of that Venn diagram of our two worlds and filling that with color and life. I think that's the beauty of this play.
How does it feel for you to play this role in this in this time as well.
It's such a joy and a privilege to be able to do this play because yeah, I'm a queer Aboriginal theatre practitioner and actor. And like when I was studying at drama school, when I was at high school, there were no texts that I could pick up and say, this is a queer Aboriginal monologue, a love scene. You know, there was just nothing. I had to like get a text that was certainly not meant to be played by a gay Aboriginal man, you know, and kind of put my own meaning onto it. Whereas this is just, it sings, and I think of like the legacy that it leaves for the next generations and waves of writers and actors and designers and directors, you know, to have this as a reference and say, this is another stepping stone on our journey of creating beautiful theatre here in Australia.
Talking about that time and on this space, I mean, you're not wearing traditional costume or anything like that. How is the space and the world of the story of these boys reflected?
It's reflected in various ways. I think it's kind of a chasm, like it's just this wooden set, and I think that Mason, who designed the costume and the set, is playing with the idea of like when you board up houses, you know, so that's what it feels like for me, of like there's something being concealed in this space. And the role, like lighting plays such a huge role in this play. Kelsey, who lit the show, it starts off so full of light. The space is so full of light. And as we kind of journey into the story and we feel the encroaching force, lighting kind of shifts, and it subtly takes audiences on that journey. And I think that, yeah, lighting and the set play such a huge role in the telling of the story. It was hard in the rehearsal room to make those psychological leaps because it's like 7 scenes and they all start at 100 and then they do this, like they fluctuate from there. It's not traditional writing in that, you know, we don't start here and go climax here. It's like we start at the climax of every scene. So it's hard in the rehearsal room. It was hard to motivate that with just the artificial lighting. But once we came into the theatre and you got to feel the lighting shift and what that does internally, it pushed our performances to where they needed to be. So lighting and set play such a huge, it's a 3rd, 4th, 5th character of the show.
Yeah, right. Wow. Wow, fantastic. I can't help but think, I mean, that's the second time you mentioned waves, and what you were just doing there was like this, riding the waves and the apex of, you know, being at starting at 100. And I couldn't help but think of that reflection of first contact and the water that you're talking about as well. Is that sort of part of the energy of the storytelling? Yeah. It sounds like.
Yeah, certainly. Right.
Yeah.
And we still experience it today. Like we're still in the wake of first contact, you know, still settling down. And so, yeah, we know that as Aboriginal people, we know what that feeling is. And as non-Indigenous people, I think they feel that feeling and they know that feeling. So it's a privilege to be able to harness that energy in a theatrical production where we can all process that feelings and hopefully arrive at some catharsis so that we can.
You mentioned also that growing up as a queer Indigenous person, you never saw these sort of stories or audition pieces. Were there stories of queer upbringing in law or in stories passed down to you through family or through mentors, etc.?
With Tiwi Island, we've got a long history of queerness. So I've always known queer people all my life. And I like to believe that, you know, love has always been love on this continent. And if someone who made you feel safe happened to be the same gender as you, that was a special thing. And it wasn't something that was shunned. Obviously, you know, there are obligations to tribe and to having children and those kinds of cultural traditional obligations. But I think that there was always a special place reserved for your person.
Is there conflict? I mean, I know you don't have first contact, that you were the only two actors on stage, but do we feel that the arrival?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that story is mainly told through the other character, Neddy. About 3/4 of the way through, he arrives on stage in traditional colonial dress, and speaking to audiences after the show who have come, that's always been a very jarring moment for them to see that silhouette in the space. Yeah, it puts you back. It puts you in that time, I think. That's the only like explicit mention of that energy. Yeah.
Well, Joseph Althouse, thank you so much. It just sounds beautiful. I can't wait to see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. I appreciate it.